thank you, Shri Kaul, for taking the time out for this event and coming all the way from Delhi to Pune. Uh, we are also very happy to welcome our trustee, Professor Amitabh Malik, Patna Shri. He is a former DRDO scientist and he anchors our discussions called PIC Adda. Professor Malik heads the Energy, Environment and Climate Change Research Vertical at PIC, which is one of the 5 research verticals at PIC. Mr. Kaul is a former IS officer, a corporate leader and a development policy analyst. As a civil servant, he has worked in leadership positions across sectors: development, health, nutrition, education, child development, food and agriculture, and industry, and also in the Prime Minister's office. He was recently appointed chairman of the Government of India Task Force on Early Childhood Care and Education and is an advisor on ECCE to the Government of Karnataka. Mr. Kaul serves as a member of the managing committee of 5 schools managed by the Delhi Public School Society, and he is also an independent director of Seva Griha, an affordable housing finance company. A number of eminent people have praised this book, and one of them, Mr. Ashok Alexander, founder director, Antara Foundation, and former India country director, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, says that this book is scholarly and yet eminently readable, brutally honest, but always optimistic, an indictment and a clarion call for change. So in these 76 years since independence, India has achieved good progress, be it the Green Revolution, White Revolution, and the very fact that we have strong roots in our constitution and democracy thanks to our founding fathers. We are proud of our armed forces and institutions like ISRO, railways, and the humble postal department. But we cannot call our progress spectacular because huge gaps exist in the field of education, healthcare, urban planning, and law enforcement. Municipal corporations and many government departments are cesspools of corruption. This book actually discusses many of these gaps: healthcare, malnutrition, food insecurity, education, urbanization, and creating jobs and improving livelihoods. So this is going to be a very interesting discussion, and I may mention that this discussion and this program will have a Q&A segment, so please keep your questions for Mr. Kaul ready. So before handing over the floor to Professor Malik, I would like to mention that PIC is an independent, multifaceted think tank, and the core areas of our public policy research are national security, energy, environment and climate change, social innovation, economic reforms and urbanization, and science, technology, and the national innovation ecosystem. We also promote the arts and culture and liberal values enshrined in our constitution, and we work very closely with young students and young people in all our research activities. So with this, I wish to thank all of you for being here, and I will request Professor Malik to please take over.
Good evening and welcome. And this is welcome from one of the founder trustee of Pune International Center 12 years ago. And special welcome to our guest and book author. The book is An Alternate Development Agenda for India. Very correctly timed and very thoughtfully put together. In fact, I call myself Young 81. This has been a phenomenally transformative stage all over the world, but particularly for India because we also got independence. We went through all the hiccups and joys of doing things. And of course, along with the world, we are also facing several environmental, technological, social, and so on other problems. So obviously, what worked as the formula for development is not going to really work anymore. And therefore, I compliment you for bringing out this alternative development agenda. Uh, very exhaustive, very studiously done, scholarly done, with references, and eminently readable. He has selected 7 areas to focus on, and I think as he takes over, he'll tell you that. But the 7 areas to cover in a small meeting of about an hour on and leaving aside some time for question and answer will be difficult. So I have decided that apart from what Mr. Kaul wants to emphasize, we will stick to some of the areas which are more relevant and where the requirement of change in approach to development, in fact, requirement of change in definition of development is also required, is also relevant. And I may have some other views, but I'll reserve that for the end. To begin with, I would like to commence this discussion by asking Ms. Kaul that after your long years in administrative service, you decided to talk about alternative approach to development, and you thought about putting across some radical ideas, not radical, but some different ideas as to how we can do justice to all the 7 sectors which are important according to him. And I'm sure people may have different views about an 8th possible and 9th possible good important area that also deserves to be mentioned. But again, as I said, we'll leave it to afterwards and we'll take that. So the real first question that I feel like posing to you is that you're calling it an alternate approach or alternate strategy. Yeah. And we are talking about India-specific issues, because otherwise in the world there is a turmoil going on. And many people are just worried about survival and not about development and progress. We leave that aside for this today evening discussion. And I'll request you to share your thoughts as to why at the end of long, successful, brilliant career in IAS, you thought of bringing out a book like this.
Thank you, Professor Malik. Let me first begin by thanking the PIC and also personally Ms. Zakia Kurian, who's here with us from the Center for Learning Resources, for taking this initiative in inviting me here and making me a part of this discussion. As Professor Malik points out, these are 7 areas which I have chosen. It does not mean that other areas are not critical. For instance, one key area that PIC has been researching on is Professor Malik's forte. But I felt little ill-equipped to deal with sectors which I've not had ready experience with. And it is also not correct to say that other conventional areas which government has focused on are not important. It could be issues of foreign policy, it could be issues of physical infrastructure like the highways and roads, or it could be our national security like defense. But when an author has to pick core areas which he feels matter and what he's passionate about, and these are areas which I felt matter most to the common person. The second set of questions is why an alternative? After so many years in the civil service, Professor Malik asks, after all, conventional parameters would show that post 91, India's had a reasonably satisfactory rate of growth. And not like China, which had 9%, 10% over 20 years, but 7.5%. And it's not as if the government has not been mindful of the concerns of the poor. So you have a lot of welfare programs. Every successive government, both in the center and state government, have been implementing welfare programs. So what is wrong with this growth come welfareism, as I'd like to call it? And here the way I looked at it was that this kind of pattern of growth has also led to certain disturbing signs. One is that India has become, in the community of nations, one of the most unequal of societies. And despite 70 years of reasonable growth, you have a situation where the bottom 20% are mired in poverty. The human development indicators, if you look at them, education, health, and nutrition, again, there have been improvements, but certainly not something that we can be very flattered about. And if you look at the challenges that are going to come in the next 2 decades, and I devote a large section on that, the situation of our urban settlements, housing for migrant households. A lot of people, a lot of households live in conditions which can only be described as unlivable. So that was the context of talking of an alternative approach. And I felt that if you make people the center of approach, rather than somebody at the center determining what is good for people, it may be a better way of looking at issues which matter to people. So I call this a people-first agenda. Or, in fact, if you get a chance to read the book, what I've done is try to position myself in the eyes of a typical impoverished tribal household. So, running thread of the book is a family, Birsa and Rasika and her 3 children, who live in a remote part of India. And I look at government programs not from the view of a civil servant, but try to position them from their views. And why are they not able to take advantage of government welfare programs? So that is the whole idea about the book. So in fact, if there was to be a single way that how my approach differs from the approach of a lot of development practitioners, is that I've not looked at a prescriptive agenda. I've looked at the way that a household would approach these kind of schemes and programs. And Professor Malik, in this whole analysis that I looked at, certain basic approaches seem to emerge. One, the typical conventional criticism of government is that the government is a very inefficient organization. It's corrupt and mismanages programs. But that the programs by themselves are great. And that is, I thought, a fundamental fallacy. A program cannot be great if it's not working. There's a contradiction. When you say a program is good, but it does not deliver outcomes, then obviously something is fundamentally wrong with the way that we have looked at that program. If it is not addressing the issues of the people, you cannot therefore then say that it's a good program. And why are families like Birsa and Rasika remain untouched with programs that are supposed to be targeted or designed for them? So this is my initial comments on the overall way that I looked at this as an alternative way of looking at development issues.
Thank you. Very true. I totally agree. However, what is at fault or why things are not working? I think that identification is yet to happen, because there are many things at fault, and everything boils down to ultimate human being. We say human welfare. Human welfare, unfortunately, in our country with our long history of occupation or foreign control, we have come to believe that there are some bigger people, larger entities who will do everything, and they will provide us with what is required. Maybe not as much as I want, but yeah, it's okay. And that philosophy or that psychology has prevailed, unfortunately, even after 75 years. I just had the opportunity to visit a very rural area for last 4 5 days. We had gone to Rajanagari with, and stayed with really poor people and yet proud people. What I really see there is that there is no dearth of value system or pride or even things like that. So basically, human being is good, undoubtedly. But we have become a part of a complicated system where being good is not enough. Being crooked pays. Being clever pays. And when I say pays, what does it mean? Everything is hitched to making better money, better control over others. And our philosophy, Indian culture, was not that. We say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. And yet, within our own Kutumbakam, you can see the amount of stress and conflicts that are already existing. So, thinking of development in terms of sectoral improvements, yes, it is one way. That is the way we have done things. But is that going to suffice? I don't think so. The reason is what India was when I was 5-year-old. I'm born 42, and what India is when I'm approaching 82 is two different things. On one hand, we are way better than many other countries, so we are not even looked at as a developing country. We are looked at as a progressive, fast developing country. If you look at our energy requirement, probably we will be the largest energy consumer in a matter of a decade or so. We are already the largest population. We have overtaken China. So we stand out as a country which is very unique. And yet, we are not able to unshackle ourselves from the old values, or the old values, very good. Unshackle ourselves from the old practices. The practices based on hero worship, idol worship, money worship, and power worship. I think that needs to be changed. That cannot be called developmental change. Or is it? Or should that be called developmental change? I'm putting in a different thought, with your permission. Because I think that the time is very opportune. We may be a small crowd, but this is the right thinking crowd, which really is worrying. Where are we going? Where are we going? We are going on a path where all that counts is GDP. We are saying 7% GDP, 9% GDP, better than so and so. What is GDP? GDP is the volume of transaction of money. It was appropriate around 1935-36 when it was thought about it, because that was the post-war era. Right now, we all envy Bhutan because their GDP is small, but their happiness index is very high. Has Bhutan gone to dogs? No. I think these are the questions that are also very relevant to development, a definition of development. Changing track. He very rightly said that we must focus on urban areas. Urban areas contribute to more than 60% GDP. All the population is not more than 40%. But that ratio of 60-40 urban-rural is changing. Because what we defined as rural most of it, or lot of it, is becoming peri-urban. And if you take that peri-urban as part of the non-urban, typical urban area, then we are almost near 50-50 already. So therefore, our development effort, our development philosophy, our development strategy must also be 50-50. However, as we have seen, and as this book has also brought out, we are concentrating on urban areas. Urban development is the topmost state. We have forgotten that the more we do this disparity, more we increase the disparity between the urban and the non-urban, the more we encourage migration of people from non-urban to urban area. And that is the kind of problem that is going on increasing. I'm not even touching climate change as yet. I'm saying just basically welfare issues, opportunities issues, money, job issues. Even if you just look at that, we have a very skewed kind of a scenario. Many of you will remember Dr. Kalam's idea in around 2000 when he talked about Pura, providing urban amenities in rural areas. Why? Because he thought the real solution to overall development was to make the urban area not that attractive, but creating the rural areas as attractive as the urban area. Therefore, the spread of welfare, spread of opportunities will go on increasing. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, I was very closely working with him that time. Although we are technologists, we believed in doing as many good things as possible. Today, as I said, I had the good luck of visiting really totally rural area. The overall feeling that I came back, oh my God, my country is so beautiful. And what we are doing in cities. So in fact, we need to create opportunities in the peri-urban areas. We need to spread horizontally and not vertically. In cities, more we grow vertically, more is the density of population. And most of the problems that we are facing is because of the density of population. Maybe my ideas are very radically different than normal, but I'm sharing that because we are really talking about development. I'll be honest, I have a small band of young, bright research scholars, and I thought, it is their future that we are talking about. We will be gone sooner or later. So I shared these thoughts and the book also to some extent with them to see what is the reaction. And the kind of response that I got, of course, they were very disappointed that climate change does not come. And just for the clarification, we are in PIC, I am editing a book on sustainable development in the climate challenged world. The whole paradigm is changing. But then that is not his expertise, Mr. Kaul, and he's right. What he has done so far in his career is really the issues. And these are important issues. However, with the permission of Dr. Kurian, I'm not going to get into the social issues, but only stick to developmental issues. So I would say, what is the next, or what is the current vulnerability of urban life? Development should reduce that vulnerability and increase stability. Economically, we are unstable. Water, food, jobs, we are unstable. Climate, temperature, we are unstable. And those are not within our immediate control, although in the long term we can control. So therefore, what is it that we should focus on? So my background, of course, my background is lasers and strategic technology, but I changed in 2006 because I was a member of NSAB, and consecutive third year, I said I must do something different. So I started looking at energy and environment security, because Pentagon was already talking about possibility of using weather as a weapon. And from then on, I've focused on environment. Having said that, I like to pose one or two questions, and with your vast experience, you may be able to provide me and the audience a little pointer. Or is it possible for our future Indian economy to look at not the GDP as the indicator of progress or welfare, but green GDP or some such a other entity which encompasses the welfare not only of the human being but also of the Mother Earth, the environment, and so on and so forth. So you can accuse me for taking the discussion away from your book, but just for a while,
Sure.
because as an IAS officer, you have very rich experience, and I am basically a scientist, curious but optimistic. So therefore,
Yeah, it's right.
I'm posing this question, if you don't mind.
So the two sets of issues which Professor Malik has talked about, one is this whole urban issue, and the second is what do you understand by development. And so the way I understand development is the way an average poor household would look at his development, and therefore his quality of life. Now, where I differ from the conventional human development activists like Amartya Sen, they felt that if you give a household health, education, and nutrition, that by itself is an end itself. But if you ask a poor household, he does also want a livelihood, a job. So that's why this book, gets into that next rung, that after you've created the enablers for human development, what next? What does a household want? He wants sustainable. He does not want to live on welfare. If you ask him, this is not his first choice.
Correct.
So then how do therefore? So that is what I now this urban issue is really contentious. But when I also talk of urban, I'm not talking of the metros as being urban. In fact, it was a quirk of the census of 2011, which classified even a habitation of 10,000 people as rural only on the criteria that its source of income of the household as assessed by the enumerator was agriculture. A predominant part was agriculture. But it had all the other elements of what in Europe would be a big town. So in that sense, even a state like Bihar would not be 15%, 18% rural, would be even in 2011 be 30%. But where I differ from Professor Malik is that when you talk of livelihoods and jobs, and we have an eminent agriculture expert, perhaps the most eminent in the state, who spent for 20 years in the civil service dedicated to agriculture, and maybe he'll oppose what I'm saying. But my evidence seems to suggest that agriculture growth cannot be more than 3-4% on average, irrespective of what innovation you introduce. So if you're looking at 7-8%, and I'm not looking at 6%, you therefore have to look at industries, you have to look at manufacturing. And even today, the GDP from rural areas, non-farm income is at least as high as agriculture income. So you're looking at livelihoods of a young generation of people who do not look at farming as their first choice. There is adequate evidence that in the next 2 decades, you will see close to 50 million households moving into, if they don't find jobs in small areas, they will move into cities like Pune. Now, that is an inevitable trend. You can live in denial, but that's going to happen. And the first thing a migrant household looks at is, where does he live? And urban elite like us blame development for slum. But that is, again, not his first choice. So therefore, I was trying to look at what can we do as policymakers to improving the quality of life of these poor migrant households who are going to come. They're not coming only to Pune, they're going to come to, as Professor Malik points out, to peri-urban small areas as well. And how can you ensure that the quality of life in terms of housing, in terms of sanitation, sewage systems, it's not just housing. Most even bigger towns do not have sewage systems. I was chairman of the Bangalore Water Supply and Sewerage, one of the most advanced modern cities. Even today, about 50% of Bangalore households don't have a well-developed sewage system. And if you've been part of Delhi, stormwater drains are covered up because they give a stench. They were never meant to carry sewage. So these are the challenges that we looked at, and what are the kind of issues of solid waste management, of sewerage, which in fact impact the quality of air that we breathe. So it's not as if climate change is not going to get impacted, it's getting impacted because the way we looked at urban areas, and there's no dichotomy between urban and rural, except that the challenges of the urban settlements is going to become much more acute if we don't deal with it today. And that is why the focus in my last chapter is on urban settlements and the quality of life that we are going to face in urban areas. It does not mean that we cannot have solutions. And I've given, for our transport systems and congestion, again, a major pollutant of our environment, is I've been a little bit of a critique of obsession with metro systems, for instance. And we calculated that if you cut down in a city about 4.5, 5 kilometers of a metro, you can put in place a high quality bus system, which are not the Maharashtra Transport Corporation buses, but you can put in 1,000 Volvo AC buses, which can give you a streamlined, good commute between the home and the actual metro station. On housing, what I've advocated is that wherever government has tried to build low-income housing, and Bombay was the first which tried to do through the slum development boards, and all of us who are familiar with Bombay know the state of those low-income settlements which were developed by government. Now, quality housing will require engagement with the private sector, and if a private builder has to choose between a luxury apartment where I had lunch with Jayant and a low-income housing, he'll go where there is more money. So how can you incentivize a private builder to build housing which is low-income housing? The migrant household instantly is not going to buy that house because he cannot afford even that 4-5 lakhs or even 8-10 lakhs. But he is looking at rental housing. So I have advocated a creation of a private sector-led low-income housing settlement, a housing market, through incentives to builders, for instance, of permitting him a more dense kind of settlement, of interest subvention if he builds for. So there can be a series of incentives that you can provide for. See, why am I saying government cannot do it? Delhi, the central government just launched a huge low-income housing scheme. In the last 10 years, the present government boldly announced that they had built 20,000 houses. Now the requirement is something like 4 or 5 million. So 1 million houses, that was what is required for the poor, and you're talking of 20,000, of 5,000. For one, the government does not own that land. It is the private builder which may be able to acquire land from small plots, etc. The other criticism, of course, the way the urban areas have developed, has been this plotted development. You acquire land and parcel it out at 20/60, 40/60. Now, cities like Pune or Bangalore cannot have plotted development. You do require more densely tall towers. Otherwise, the other infrastructure has to spread, and you don't create cities. You create, like Pune and Bangalore and Delhi have become urban sprawls. You keep on extending the geography of a city, so beyond the boundaries of any manageable city. The second set of criticism is obsession with widening of roads and building of flyovers.
The obsession is not with widening of roads, obsession with the cars, private vehicle.
So because you look at public transport to move vehicles rather than moving people, and any transport economist will tell you the objective should be to move people, and you can obviously move more people through public transport rather than through vehicles. And each time you widen a road, you're actually shrinking pedestrian pathways or walking pathways. And a survey, for instance, in Bombay showed that 55% of commute in Bombay is not through vehicles, but through pedestrians. They commute to work. So if you can make life easier, not only for the man, but also the woman on the street, provide her safe walking paths, she will actually move outside the home into places, because one reason she's not coming out to the workplace because there's no safe commute for her during the day and more particularly at night. So these are the kind of issues that we have touched upon in the book on urban areas. And the reason I focus on urban areas because this is an area not of urban development, but of urban quality of life, which I touched upon, which I think is very critical as we move forward the next decade or so.
Yeah, very true. But I'll just add here, and then we'll open it for question answer. We criticize maybe ourselves. Government is who? After all, it's we. We elected our government. But why is it happening that the right things are not happening? Money is being spent, but the result is not what we should be. Obvious answer? Obsession with GDP. As long as GDP goes up, you are satisfied. Your boss is satisfied, your government is satisfied, your leaders are satisfied. What else is going up? Nothing. Only money transaction is going up. So therefore, as an environmentalist, as a human being, as a 80-year-old person, I'm saying this obsession with GDP has to be replaced with a measure of welfare, real welfare, well-being, feeling good. It has to be replaced with an entity which will not create competition but cooperation. We are actually creating a society. Why? Dr. Kujain is here, expert in education. In the schools, colleges, universities, all that we focus on, what is really rewarded, is how much you can mug and how much you can vomit. How much you have absorbed, nobody measures. And whatever you have absorbed, whether it is relevant to quality of life, to the value of society, nobody measures. That has to change somehow. I don't know. I'm not expert to have it. But our education has to also change, which means what? Our society has to change. Number one. Number two, everything depends on energy. Every development, every progress, everything depends on energy. That energy, we are all aware that despite all the debate and all that is going on, we are still 70% dependent on fossil fuel. And Niti Aayog, which is our so-called top-notch think tank in place of the Planning Commission, their analysis shows that the coal will be relevant till 2047, till we are 100 years old. Why? Because nobody has thought of the price or the cost that India will pay, Indians will pay for using coal till 2047. So, somewhere, something, there are not matching. Urban, we say, we create vertical growth. Every logic says spread out. It will be much more distributive, much more efficient. Electricity, we say main grid को बहुत तगड़ा बनाओ. Logic says have it distributed generation, have microgrids, smart microgrids, number of them in small areas that can. We are also already doing that in PIC and showing it. My point I'm making is that the development that we talk about, that we are talking about, is for the youth of today. What does the youth of today want? Do we want the same formula that, of course, it has delivered results, but it would have done much, much better? So, with your permission, shall I open it up for question and answer?
Just
Touch upon 7 sectors. Which are the rest 5 sectors?
so I'll
yeah.
briefly
Sure.
talk about the other sectors.
We should know the 5 other sectors.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
So
no, you
basically,
you can read the book.
as Professor Malik talked about, the approach is a twin approach. One is well-being. So what impacts well-being? So therefore, health, education, nutrition, and along with well-being,
even
I've
gen-
added
even gender
and
imbalance.
gender.
Gender imbalance.
Gender. So you cannot talk about a development paradigm without talking of women who are half the population. And once you have enabled this well-being, then livelihoods. Because without livelihoods and jobs, these enablers of well-being are meaningless to a household. So that is the basic. And here, my prescriptions are very simple. That if you look at the poor household, why is it that the household is not able to take best advantage of government programs? For instance, I give some examples. You have immunization taking place in a village, and you blame the household for not sending the child to that camp. You have a health center, and the household doesn't access the health center. Now, is it that the household is irrational? Or is it the fact that in that household or that home, there are other priorities which take front stage? And there I talk about a slim book called Scarcity, that the scarcity of time, when a poor household is dealing with survival, and if she has a leaking roof on the day of the immunization camp, should she focus on settling that roof? Or if she's not able to feed her child, or take her the child to the immunization camp. So these are real issues when you look at the household, and then you realize that it's not as if the impoverished household does not want a child to be educated.
Because the title itself that corrodes
Absolutely.
Its viscera is very immensely magnificent.
So basically, so these
economics, energy, education, environment.
So basically, therefore, what we are saying is that these aspects of health, human development, and livelihoods have to be looked upon holistically if you're talking of a development agenda.
This book is eminently readable. That's what I said in the beginning.
So
those literature was there. And I don't think we have.
Before I leave,
we have
join you for the discussion, there one other areas is why do governments not embark on programs which actually make a meaningful impact? And one reason is that in the perception of the government, these may not be very popular. And the test of a good program cannot be that it does not deliver results. It must also be a program which the political powers find attractive. And I've tried to, therefore, in my own way, design alternative solutions which could also become electoral win-wins to the party which embarks on the program. You take an example like what the AAP did about school education. It has become an electoral kind of win-win for the AAP. But please remember that for AAP, as an example, the school education program, the way that they talked about improving the schools, there's of course some criticism the way they've gone about it, was not in its manifesto. You know, the AAP manifesto in Delhi did not talk about improving schools. It talked about starting 1,000 new schools. And had the government of India, which controls land in Delhi, given them land for 1,000 schools, their obsession would have been to build buildings, recruit new teachers, rather than talking of the 10,000 new existing schools which exist in Delhi. Because they did not get land, they focused on improving the quality of schools in India. And that is my approach even in the health. I've advocated no new hospitals, no new health centers, at least for the next 10 years. You already have 30,000 primary health centers which are not functional. You have a large number of taluk level community hospitals which are not functional, which are bereft of doctors, which are bereft of support staff. So focus, because when you have limited resources, you have to use them more judiciously. And therefore, I try to quantify in the book what it would cost and is it fiscally sustainable for the government to embark on the recommendations that I do. And we find that just a mere 2% of GDP would be enough to address basic issues of human development and livelihoods in a manner which would significantly improve the quality of life of its people. And in ways that are fiscally sustainable, in ways which are within the implementation capacity of government. So basically, if the government focuses on 10, 12 interventions rather than hundreds of programs, under the name of the Prime Minister itself, there are about 100 programs. And between the center and the state, I've counted more than 400 programs, some with such minuscule budgets that they are obviously going to have no impact and no focus. So the district collector, if he's saddled with 50 programs to monitor and review, he will not do justice to any. But if he had only 8 or 10 to focus on, obviously the impact and its implementation would be that much greater. I would be very happy if you get time to read the book, and certainly Professor Malik.
In fact, I'll add to what he's saying. To the title, I feel like adding a byline. An alternate development agenda for India, in bracket, more of the same will no more do. That is the real issue that we are facing. The more of the same will not do. And I have constrained myself to not say about climate change, but let's see. So let's open this for whatever discussion young people should say, but be brief to the point, and only one question per person.
So my question is that with the current dispensation at the center and the previous ones, right wing and center right wing, who derive their legitimacy from a neoliberal way of living life, which commodifies every aspect of human life and nature. Do you think your alternative agenda will be of having people-centric policies would be acceptable, except for earning votes, without the ideology of having people as its development of people as its center? Do you think so? For a neoliberal government, an alternative agenda would be acceptable?
Wow, she has widened the whole spectrum.
So see, what we found was that it's even where you had opposition governments in place, they did not always have the same agenda, which was people-centric. So it goes beyond ideologies, and it goes by perception of what people want. And sometimes by accident, governments embark on useful programs. For instance, the Narega program, the Rural Employment Group, where Maharashtra had taken the lead with the EGS, was being criticized as being a very populist program, only to win votes. And that may have been the initial objective of the UPA government. Can we find something which can be a magic wand to, get people votes? But as it turned out, it became a program which has transformed a lot of lives. So I do believe that with every government, there is a space in being able to influence, and that is what I am an optimist, and I'm hoping that irrespective of ideologies, at least some of these issues can be picked up irrespective of, because at some level, in their own way, every government does believe in welfareism of a kind. Now, if we can transform that welfare programs into programs which enhance the productive capacity of households, they become a little more sustainable.
Yeah. Anybody? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
One here. Yes. Go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
1 second. I'm giving an opportunity. Young lady first. Then, please.
Hello, sir. We have been introduced before, but my name is Megha, and I'm a policy researcher working under PIC. So I had the privilege of reading your book, and I thoroughly loved it. So in chapter 6, you have spoke about tackling the job crisis, and I think that it's directly related to the state of education we have. So with changing circumstances, with changing graphs of technology, of social issues, of international issues, according to you, can you give me 3 to 5 key transferables or key skill sets that we can make students imbibe or we can teach the students of India today so that they can contribute to the developmental agenda? And I'm not talking about students like me. I'm talking about students who learn in government schools. I'm talking about rural kids, about urban poor. So what are those 3 to 5 broad skill sets that we can target for?
I think you possess all the skill sets. The fact that you raise these issues is testimony. And when I interact with young people, I find a lot of them have their heart in the right place. And if you have the heart in the right place, then you will do good. And there are, compared to Professor Malik's generation, and including my generation, the opportunities for creating public value are enormous. And you are in the area of environment and climate change. There are other areas who are running businesses, small businesses.
She's a law student.
So across development sectors, industries, there are opportunities for the youth, and there are no special skill sets required. It's just your heart which has to be in the right place.
So, sir, I'm a student of Symbiosis College of Arts and Commerce. So, as an aspiring entrepreneur, I want to solve the problem of public transport. So, I have this approach called underground transportation, which Elon Musk also approached. So, sir, I wanted to know your opinions on this approach of underground transportation, where we will be including hyperloops technology in underground, and we won't be having the problem of obsession of cars on the road top. So what views do you have on that?
You're asking the author, no? Or me?
Yeah.
No. Please go ahead.
So I think it's just a question of economics. If it's cost effective, certainly go ahead and do it. But certainly surface transport is at
the
10%
cheapest.
of the cost
Yes.
of what you can do underground. Maybe the US can think of underground systems and using technology. Japan has metros which can go at the speed of aeroplanes at 400 kilometers an hour. But I think more mundane, easy to implement solutions exist for India, and let us exhaust those remedies first before we think of such advances. And maybe when your grandchild gets up, that might be the time when we look at solutions but certainly an interesting area for your research.
To partially answer your question, we are now focusing on very high density of population. If we disperse that density of population, then commuting requirement itself will come down.
Yes.
So that's why I'm saying, instead of creating a fantastic metropolis, we should start creating very urban areas which will be as attractive as cities. That is
one thing, on the urban transport issue, since this is area, one reason I've been a critique of the metro systems, I don't know whether you're familiar with Delhi. the Delhi metro system has created Delhi into an urban sprawl.
Yeah.
Because now you're talking of taking the metro from virtually Sonipat, Panipat, 40 kilometers, down south towards almost Jaipur, and then east to almost to Meerut. Now, what Professor Malik is saying, actually a metro system should be intra-city system. It cannot move from one city to the other, because then you're extending the boundaries of the city. So you should have a Pimpri as a township, develop it, and not have a metro system so it goes one end of the airport to the other end of the Bombay, and after 20 years you'll talk about a metro system from Bombay to Pune. So then what are you doing? You're stretching the boundary of the city rather than creating more livable habitations, is what Professor Malik has been advocating.
As Mr. Sanjay sir said, there would be only 3% growth rate in the agriculture sector, and 50 million people are going to migrate anyways. So I wanted suggestion from you as an aspiring entrepreneur from myself. How can I create job in the non-farming sectors for the rural India?
There is no easy answer. Having said that, the non-farming sector jobs actually will be more attractive no matter what you do, because of the technological evolution. We are all aware that technology is going to be offering artificial intelligence. Technology is going to offer visual, what you call the wearable devices. So the jobs or opportunities are growing in that sector where people have their aspirations. What agriculture sector is doing, non-farming sector or farming sector is doing, is providing the basics. The farming sector basics can improve, provided the methodology changes. Methodology changes for being more high temperature reliant, because every 1 degree increase in temperature reduces your productivity by almost 9-10%. And we are already feeling that, because we are 1.5, nearly 1.5% hotter. That situation is going to get worse. The other thing that we are different is our population density. So that's why I'm saying, if we can reduce our population density, many of the so-called problems will be redefined. If we redefine the problem, we open up the possibility of redefining development as well. That's the kind of complex answer that I can give.
If you look at non-farm incomes in rural areas, traditionally there were two sectors which employed households. One were your crafts, traditional handicrafts, and the second was your handlooms, textiles. And unfortunately, those traditional livelihoods have gone. Not that there is no potential for entrepreneurs to enter those areas, but because we have not looked at handlooms and handicrafts from the modern technology perspective. Why is it that China controls 80% of handicraft exports globally? Whereas India's history, we should have. And why is it that Bangladesh has been able to overtake India in textiles? Obviously, the government support in modernizing, giving, making technology available to the craftsman, technology available to the handloom weaver, so that he can replicate, interesting support in design, catering to the market, which wants a different design every year. So those are areas where government can step in. In fact, I've identified areas where you can revive traditional handicrafts and traditional handlooms and make India a globally competitive. So there are opportunities in non-farm traditional livelihoods, provided we look upon it from the eyes of a young man like you.
I'm Jayashree. I'm a retired individual, but I'm still a learner. And thank you for the insight you've given. But right now, we are living in a world of high tech, high speed. If my mobile hangs, I become jittery. And artificial intelligence and high tech, high speed is taking the world by a storm. But yet to reach here, I get delayed because I'm caught in a traffic jam. So, how do you look at it now from here? Taking the nation, not only the nation ahead, again nowadays we are also talking about one world, one family, one currency, same language, same thinking. So
No,
how do you see it
that will
from
not
here now?
work.
Now, I think in your question, you yourself given the answer that unless we have a diversity of approaches, and in fact, I also mentioned that even the solutions that I have given, I don't want to be prescriptive because each of you would have solutions which are perhaps as good or even better than what I have offered. The whole idea is that of the key objective of the book was, can we trigger a debate on issues that matter to people? Otherwise, as Professor Malik points out, our obsession with quantitative GDP uh, will occupy the entire development agenda, and issues which matter to people will get lost sight of. But that is the whole purpose of not only this book, but the whole purpose of today's discussion was that.
Yes, ready you.
So my question is, what is the catalyst for enabling an interplay between social, cultural, and physical infrastructure?
Just repeat what.
What is it that is going to catalyze? Because you mentioned that there are public health centers where they're not being used. So we have physical infrastructure, for example, or on a daily basis we had 40 kilometers of road.
Okay, let me try and answer. For instance, when you looked at the health system, and I said that that when Birsa and Rasika's child falls ill, she does not go to the health center or to the even to the ASHA worker. Whom does she go to? She goes to the quack. Now you can say she's irrational, and data shows that in every village in India, there are 2 local health providers. Now you can live in denial and say they're quacks, nobody should go there. But that is, as you said, the cultural history of India is that they have trust in that quack. Now, how do you develop trust in the ASHA worker? Is the challenge. The other way is that you work with these local health providers. So in Bengal, there was an experiment where they worked with local health practitioners, and they found that they were able to get local health providers to make referrals to the health system, so that you marry that cultural ethos that the household had of the tradition of going to the local person that he or she trusts, and yet be able to make it accessible to the household. So the other set of issues is gender. Now the easy answer was that you educate the woman and you'll feel work participation going up, and that has not happened. In fact, the data shows that there is a U-shaped kind of thing, that as a woman attains secondary schools, high schools, the actual chance of she going to the workplace declines. So the work participation rates are very high for uneducated women, as you'd expect, agricultural labor. But as the educated household has higher income levels, there's pressure from the household because of this cultural mindsets of her place being at the home. And since that initial poverty has been taken care of, the woman has to become the homemaker, the mother, and also they face that triple burden of household chores. And in fact, since you are a woman, there's in fact a 4th dimension of gender which I discovered just yesterday, and that is going to be a 4th burden of the woman. So it's not just that she is having a burden of being the carer for the child, she has to care for the husband, and yet work. The fourth dimension is that India is going to become an aging society. And who will be the caregiver for the elderly? Not the man. It will be the woman. So this is the kind of burden. And unfortunately, the cultural mindset is when you do a survey of women, you find that their attitudes are, on average, not very different from the male. So the woman also feels that her place is in the home. So that is the kind of interplay of cultural mindsets that even modern education is not able to sometimes take care of. And those are the challenges when you're looking at issues of gender, that the challenges that has to be faced frontally in a very sustained fashion. Because this Beti Bachao, Beti kind of Padhao is not going to give any significant improvements on issues of gender.
Yeah, every coin has two sides. That's what you have to understand.
Thank you, sir,
Yeah.
for wonderful discussion about your book. I have just curiosity about have as a country for last say 17 years or going forward also are we why are we not talking growth and development, or is it sometimes we are coming under the pressure just because we want to require some kind of resources from outside in various forms. We are under pressure. We take ad hoc basis some kind of development, and it could be only limited to the some section, not all. So what is preventing us? Why we are not talking growth and development, including the welfare kind of things, and why we as a country we are still not agreeing to one kind of agenda that central state they should be working more together rather we should have always kind of see difference and diversity is fine, but as far as human progress, as far as basic fundamentals, why we are not able to come to kind of united. Thank you.
I don't know whether Professor Malik
I
has
have
an
a-
answer. I don't have an answer. But you see, growth, it's not as if the governments don't believe in welfare. They have their own vision of what is welfare and what they can sell to people at the time of elections. And there are a lot of fairly well-intended, in fact, I'm not even saying negative, they're reasonably well-intentioned welfare programs. But my problem with them is that some of them, or most of them, do not enhance the productive capacity of the household, and therefore they become unsustainable. So the challenge is for people like you and me to be able to influence governments to not only work together, not work in conflict, but also devise programs which are popular electorally. Because if they're not popular electorally, I can assure you they will never get implemented. So that's the challenge of a policymaker. How can you advocate something which the political masters find attractive to put in their manifestos? Otherwise, we can have academic discussions on what is good for people. It's not going to help.
An alternate answer to your question.
Yeah, please.
Growth usually is associated with business, corporate, industry, whereas welfare is more associated with home, society.
All not development.
So it's not as if the two are different. But I'm sure many of you must have followed what Narayan Murthy said very recently, and it came up in a major newspaper.
70-hour week.
Yeah, right? Why would he say that? Because from Narayan Murthy's point of view, he's a exceptionally talented person. The growth is measured by how much return the shareholder can get from the
Employees.
So it is. So I'm almost tempted to say that we have one single disease in our society that's called GDP. Because since everything is focused on that's a problem. Last question or yes? And Sanjeev, I'll
Hello, sir. Good evening, everyone. I am a media student actually from Vishwakarma University. So my question is related to media perspective only. So as you were talking about corruption and development sustainability, so I would just like to ask that India India states that we promote free press, but that is not actually true. Many political parties still own media houses. So we know that media sometimes has to favor a few political parties which do not lead us into progress because we know something is wrong, but we are not able to talk about it.
question
So,
is?
yes,
Yeah.
so I would just like to ask that what do you expect from the media that we can help you
Yeah.
in your alternative development agenda?
So I think, we have Zakia, who's a communication specialist. So maybe after the session, you can spend time with her. But, uh, I think there are opportunities. And in fact, in my book, Addressing Issues, I have several places talked about the importance of communication. If you really want to reach out to poor households, communication is a key, and sustained communication. Fortunately for us, outside the corporate media houses, you have now with technology, social media, which is certainly affording huge opportunities for spreading your message. And by the time you graduate, I'm sure that social media would offer opportunities. So that gives us some kind of an alternate to the corporate media. But unfortunately, the globally also, it's not just in India. If you look at US also the media is controlled by one or two, three or four corporate businesses. So I don't think what we are finding in India is something which we should not have expected. But the opportunities are that there is a social media outreach opportunities which did not exist during our generation. So I think that is what you should. That's why what you should look forward to.
I've been looking at some similar questions also for about 40 years or so. So it's not a newcomer. I have not had the chance to read your book. I will read it. But I did a little bit of cheating. And knowing that you're an IAS officer, I knew you'd present the bill at the end, so I looked at the bill directly. So that tells me, budget mein paisa hai ya jeb mein paisa hai. You kept 1,500 billion rupees, which is 4,000 billion, about $500 billion. That's our overall sector. उसमें से 1,500, if I'm correct, is for jobs, additional jobs, which is a very major part of the 4,000 billion. Plus there is of course another 1,500 for existing Manrega or whatever it is. So really speaking, that is the core of the thing, because it is then capable of driving the other parts of the agenda.
Right.
Now, of course, given that we are still not, we can have an endless debate on this about what is the level of poverty, etc. But given that unless we are able to have people themselves and their incomes driving their own growth and so on, we are not going to be able to make it. That's one way of looking at it. I mean, it may sound pessimistic, but that's not bothering now whether things are optimistic or pessimistic. You talk of an agenda, but I think in terms of even understanding what that agenda is, you have to also be critical of what has been the existing paradigm. So what we are talking of is not really creating another agenda. I think we have to understand that we have to now think of a different paradigm completely. Which also means that for those who want to argue for a different paradigm, I have to be able to show that the existing paradigm is going to really fail or collapse, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So for example, I would have an honest difference of opinion with you that the urban areas are going to be sustainable in the future, in the longish term future. I would also have a difference of opinion with you about how much it would cost to create industrial jobs. I mean, today for I've been looking at some of these figures and I'll stop looking at them, but it would be at least 2 crores of rupees for a decent industrial job. I'm not talking about big jobs, I'm not talking about Zomato, etc. Where do we have the money? Where can we create the money for that kind of? It's nice to be able to say that we have industrial jobs and so on. So I think through some critical engagements of these kind, we can show that the existing paradigm is going to really collapse. And even the middle class, this is not even, don't even have to bring climate change into it, because climate change is going to accelerate the whole thing. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's going to accelerate this kind of collapse that they are heading towards. So, as you have said, that we need to engage, to have a much broader discussion on these issues, because these cannot be now swept under.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll close this with one small observation from my side. We all went through the COVID. It taught us many lessons. It taught us that when livelihood is in danger, the profit and GDP takes the back seat. Please understand, the next calamity will be climate calamity. It will touch everybody. It will touch every nation. It may not happen tomorrow, but it will happen during the lifetime of the young people who are sitting here. It will happen before 2050. Therefore, whatever we do today, we have to understand that we have to factor what Sanjeev just now said. Things are going to get worse. Now, worse means what? Productivity will go down, material cost will go up. The cost of repair of damage and loss and damage will be enormous. The well-to-do countries will go on promising. Ultimately, nothing comes. So, apart from one world, one thing, all that ideological thing that we talk about, very nice. Ultimately, each country will have to fend for itself. We, being such a populous country, have a huge problem in front of us. Young people, please take it seriously. This is book discussion, but it allows us to look inward. What are we doing as a people, as a society? We are still chasing rupee value. I think our value system has to get evaluated. I'm sorry, I'm deviating from this. This book is excellent, and I'm not promoting or selling for him, but this really will make you think. Where are we and where are we going? So, intention of Mr. Kaul, I think, is entirely well served, and this discussion has been very fruitful to my mind. So, with this, shall I say thank you very much?
A very good evening to all. I request Professor Malik, founder member PIC, to present our guest with PIC publication.
This is from PIC.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
On behalf of Pune International Center, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to our distinguished guest, Mr. Sanjay Kaul, and the chair of the event, Professor Amitabh Bhane, for the incredible discussion on the book and alternative development agenda for India. Your thoughts on the unplanned urbanization and the consequences we face as a result of which has given us a lot of food for thought. I would like to thank all the PIC members and the audience here today for attending the event.